The movie begins at the American-Canadian border, where we hear the constant buzzing of surveillance drones sweeping over the area. At the same time, we hear the voice of a boy named Nate, who explains that the sound we're hearing belongs to government drones sent out to monitor the border. As soon as the drones move away, several people suddenly rise from the grass and sprint toward the opposite side of the border. Nate then tells us that he once paid $18 million in taxes to the government because he had made $60 million from selling drugs. The government never knew how much he truly earned, so he didn't report the full amount, meaning he didn't actually pay taxes on most of it. The story then moves to October 31st, 2005. Nate is traveling with his friend Topper, having dropped out of high school earlier because he never enjoyed studying. Meanwhile, a lavish party is taking place at the house of a man named Brandon Butler. Surrounded by dozens of girls, Brandon is enjoying himself, living a life far removed from his origins. He had grown up in a Korean orphanage before being adopted by a drug dealer, and now he himself had become deeply involved in drug distribution. Nate and Topper arrive at Brandon's party by car, but the guard stops them and refuses to let them enter. Topper insists that they're here to meet someone named Wang, Brandon Butler, and the guard reluctantly calls Brandon outside. When Brandon sees them, he asks who they are. Topper claims to be a friend of Daniel, but Brandon immediately points out that this isn't Daniel's party. When Topper tries to cover up by saying they just wanted to have fun, Brandon suddenly pulls out a gun. Terrified, Nate and Topper swear and immediately run for their lives. Brandon fires at them while chasing after them, but they manage to jump into their car and escape. The next morning, Nate wakes up at home and immediately starts getting high. Afterward, he prepares breakfast for his younger brother, who is about to leave for school, and then he goes to wake up his mother. Nate's father is no longer alive, so the responsibility of running the household falls solely on Nate and his mother. Nate works as a pizza delivery boy to help support the family, and at one point, he delivers pizzas to the home of a wealthy man named Tuzar. When Tuzar opens the door, Nate realizes how rich he is. A party is going on inside, and a girl is also present there. Tuzar tells Nate that he can't make much money delivering pizzas and that smuggling has made him rich. Seeing this, Nate becomes thoughtful and frustrated because no matter how hard he worked, he still had very little. Later that night, Nate is reading a magazine when he comes across an article about Canadian drugs. Canadian marijuana was known for being exceptionally high quality, making it extremely valuable all over the world. However, sneaking it across the Canadian border into the United States was far from easy, and Nate himself knew almost nothing about Canada. In the same magazine, he finds an advertisement for a man named Joseph Loya, who specializes in navigating legal loopholes. The next day, Nate disguises himself with a mask of an older man's face and goes to visit Joseph. But Joseph immediately tells him to remove the mask. Once Nate reveals his face, he says he wants to learn about marijuana transportation. Because his friend wants to get into the business, Joseph explains that near the Canadian border lies a dense forest, but transporting marijuana through that forest is extremely risky. If a soldier catches someone smuggling marijuana, they could be imprisoned for life. The duration of their sentence would depend on how much marijuana they were carrying, whether they had weapons, and most importantly, whether they had enough money to pay his legal fees. Joseph was basically hinting that those who could afford him had a better chance of getting out. Despite the danger, Nate is determined to take the risk, but this job cannot be done by one person alone, so he talks to Topper. At first, Topper refuses, saying that if they get caught, they'll spend their entire lives in prison. But Nate keeps pushing and convincing him until Topper finally agrees. The two of them then travel to the forest near the US-Canada border. After walking deep inside, they reach the border itself. They suspect there may be hidden cameras monitoring the area, but despite the fear, they decide to take the risk. They begin to run as fast as they can, terrified that an alarm might go off, that someone might chase them, or that they might be attacked. But nothing happens, and the boys eventually reach a road and begin walking along it. After a short distance, Nate spots a kilometer marker sign and excitedly points it out to Topper, saying, "Look at this! A kilometer sign!" Topper doesn't understand why that matters, so Nate explains that this proves they have officially crossed into Canada. Realizing they managed to cross the border so easily without being caught makes both of them incredibly happy. The next day, Nate and Topper drive back toward Canada to meet a dealer they had researched earlier. But at the border toll checkpoint, the Canadian police stop them. A female officer approaches their car and asks why they are entering Canada. Nate lies, saying they are going to meet a friend. The officers don't believe them. They suspect the boys might be smuggling drugs. The police thoroughly search both the car and the boys themselves, but they don't find anything illegal. Nate and Topper then head straight to the address of the dealer they had tracked down. When they arrive, they see marijuana being sold openly at the shop. The man shows them different strains and explains the varying qualities. Nate finds one he likes and asks for the price, saying they have only $1,800. At that moment, a man named John approaches them from behind and quietly tells them to follow him immediately. He warns that the entire area is under surveillance and that if they buy marijuana here and try to cross back into the US, the police will surely catch them. Nate and Topper panic and follow him outside. John takes them to his place, gives them marijuana, and says he saved them that day. They must pay him quickly and leave right away. Terrified, they hand him the money, take the marijuana, and quickly leave. Before reaching the US border again, they stop the car. Topper gets out early because he plans to enter the forest and cross through the woods to avoid detection. Meanwhile, Nate will drive through the official border crossing alone. At the checkpoint, the border officer checks the toll logs and asks Nate where his friend went, the same friend who entered Canada with him. Nate lies again, saying Topper stayed behind with another friend. Suspicious, the officers search Nate's car again and even make him remove his clothes for a physical inspection. Still, they don't find anything. After successfully crossing into the US, Nate tries reaching Topper over the walkie-talkie, calling repeatedly. Just then, Topper suddenly jumps in front of Nate's car exhausted and tells him to get out of there quickly. He had run 13 kilometers through the forest to reach the US side. Both boys are thrilled that they pulled the whole thing off. Within just a few hours, they sell all the marijuana in the US and earn a huge profit. Encouraged, they immediately decide to go back to Canada again. This time, they travel to a town called Nelson. While Nate is filling up the car with gas, Topper notices a girl sitting nearby, smoking. Her name is Nicole. He compliments the smell, and she tells him the taste is even better, asking if he wants to try some. Nicole hands him the weed, and Topper calls Nate over to meet her. Both of them enjoy the taste and ask if they can buy some to take home. Nicole agrees and tells them to follow her. They get into their car and drive behind her to her house. Inside, Nicole introduces them to her mother and says she wants to show them something. Her mom calls for her husband, and then Nicole's father blindfolds both Nate and Topper and leads them somewhere inside the house. When they remove the blindfolds, they're stunned. Massive indoor marijuana plants are growing everywhere in a controlled environment. Nicole's father, John, explains that they maintain perfect temperature, oxygen, and CO2 balance. Their plants produce exceptionally good flowers, and he says he has spent 20 years mastering this setup. One hit, he claims, will make anyone feel like they've entered another universe. Later, Nate and Topper relax in a hot tub with John and his wife. John then tells Nate that he can't do small quantities. He charges $1,600 per pound and won't sell less than 1 pound. Nate surprised him by saying they were actually planning to buy 300 pounds, around 136 kilograms. Shocked, Topper asks Nate what he's doing, but John simply says, "All right then, pay me the money." John tells them to take the product and leave, saying he can't give anything on credit. After stepping outside, Topper turns to Nate and asks if he has lost his mind. How are they supposed to cross the border with 300 pounds of product? Nate insists this is their big opportunity, one they cannot afford to miss. He explains that 300 pounds will cost $6,400 and that he will arrange the money somehow. They stay there for the night. Later, Nate wakes up and sees Nicole being intimate with Topper. Feeling uncomfortable, he quietly walks away. Nate then takes the sample John gave him, hides it inside a condom, and swallows it. After that, he takes a car alone, heads to the Canada-US border, and crosses it. The police stop him and search him thoroughly, but because he swallowed the sample, they find nothing. Later, Nate waits inside a club because he wants to meet a man named Barry Lerner. Barry sits right in front of him, but Nate is afraid to approach him. Barry is originally from Israel and was part of the team that retaliated after the Munich attack where Israeli athletes were killed. He had 5 murder charges against him, though he was never convicted. Now, Barry is involved in several illegal activities, but cannabis was his first love. Nate tries telling Barry that he knows Barry works with Brandon Butler and that he has a business proposal and wants to partner with him. Barry denies knowing any Brandon Butler and claims he only deals in cell phones. Barry's man orders Nate to leave, and he is forced to walk away. Just then, Nate receives a call from Topper. At the same time, Barry sends a woman to Nate. She takes him aside, searches him, and demands he tell her exactly what he planned to say to Barry. Soon after, Barry calls Nate to meet him in a building's parking garage. Nate shows him the sample. Barry smokes it and says it's excellent. Even Brandon never gave him product this good. Barry then pulls out a bag of cash and hands it to Nate, saying it contains $666,000, and he wants 300 pounds of this same product. Nate is surprised and reminds him that he had asked for $2,600 per pound, but Barry says he can only pay $2,200 per pound. Nate agrees. Barry then asks if he can trust Nate, warning him that if Nate tries to betray him, nobody will ever find a boy named Nate, not his family, not his friends. After this, Nate recruits some of his old school friends into the operation. Nate explains the payment system. Anyone who runs through the forest to cross the border will get $3,500, and anyone who drives the car will get $1,500. Hearing this, the friends agree and begin practicing running. They even design camouflage outfits made of grass and bushes to blend in while crossing through the forest. Nate also strictly instructs everyone to keep their cell phones switched off because if they're on, border surveillance could track their signal. The group follows every instruction. They run through the forest, cross the border, and wait at the designated pickup spot. They collect the product from Nicole, pay her, and run back into the forest with it. Nate explains that one of them must bring back 60 pounds through the woods. He warns them he will know exactly how much they were supposed to pick up and exactly how much they bring back, so no one should try stealing or hiding anything. With this precise planning, the operation succeeds multiple times. Nate even treats his friends to a nice dinner at a restaurant. During the dinner, a young boy approaches Topper and says he wants to join their gang and do the same work they do. He claims he heard they pay $3,500 for crossing the border with product. Everyone in the restaurant overhears. Nate asks the boy who told him that and orders him to leave. The boy starts cursing Nate, and his mother drags him out of the restaurant. Since the boy had been talking to Topper, Nate pulls Topper outside and demands an explanation. Topper shows Nate an envelope full of money and asks what it is. Nate tells him it's the $3,500 runner's payment he had decided. Topper gets angry and says they were partners. He deserves a share of the profit. Nate says the idea was his, the planning was his, and he handled all the deals. Topper then demands $10,000 the next time he runs across the border, and he walks away. Up until this point, Nate himself had never calculated exactly how much profit he would make from moving 300 pounds across the border. After this argument, Nate takes his mother to see a house. She loves it immediately. After going inside, she asks who the house belongs to. Then she notices a framed photo showing her, Nate, and Nate's little brother Nate reveals that the house is hers. Everything she ever wanted is inside this house. She then asks how he managed to afford it. Nate lies, saying some of his friends work in the stock market. He invested in an IPO they recommended, made a lot of profit, and bought the house. Nate's mother knows he is lying, but she stays silent. Money is suddenly flowing into Nate's life, but nobody knows where it's coming from. For the next 6 months, Nate and his team continue doing the same operations. Through this, Nate earns up to $1 million every week. Meanwhile, John continues supplying high-quality product to Nate, which Barry absolutely loves. Nate and Topper deliver the product to Barry by visiting an apartment, placing the goods inside a cupboard, and picking up the money from there. Nate hides a portion of the product in the forest so he can use it later during difficult times. Meanwhile, Nate and his friends begin spending heavily on their lifestyle. One night, while Nate's team is crossing the border, a group of armed men suddenly blocks their path and points guns at them, demanding their bags. Topper, pretending to hand over the bag, strikes the man's gun, and the entire team begins running. The gunman fires at them, but they manage to escape. Later, Nate's friends tell him they nearly died because Brandon Butler had attacked them. Realizing the danger to their lives, they demand triple payment for the next trip. All of them insist on this, and Nate finally agrees, promising to pay them 3 times the amount on the next run. Soon after, Nate's birthday arrives. He arranges every possible luxury for his friends. Many girls are present, and the entire team is partying together. The party is happening at the same location where Brandon Butler used to hold his parties. Brandon watches from a distance as Nate's group celebrates, and he becomes furious. He storms into the party with a gun and starts firing. In anger, Nate grabs his own gun, rushes outside, and fires back at Brandon. Brandon then escapes. Determined to kill Nate and Topper, Brandon hires 2 killers. He gives them the boys' photographs and offers them some money, but the killers tell him they charge $50,000 per kill. Brandon tells them that the boys have millions of dollars in cash, which they can keep once they kill them. The movie then jumps to June 2006. The 2 killers go to Nate's house to kill him, but since Nate's house had been attacked before, Nate had already moved his family to a secret location Barry had told him about. At that moment, Nate's friend Scutch was at the old house with a girl. The killers break in, tie up Scutch and the girl, and then realize that the boy they see is not Nate. They begin questioning Scutch about Nate's whereabouts. Scutch can't give them any real information but lies, saying he knows where Nate lives and can take them there. Following Scutch's directions, the killers take him and his girlfriend to the house where Nate and his family are staying. As the killers approach the house, 2 young girls see them and scream, Hearing them, the girl's father rushes out and fires at the killer's vehicle. Forced to retreat, the killers speed away and abandon Scutch and his girlfriend on the roadside out of frustration. Later, Scutch meets Nate and their friends and explains everything that happened. Enraged, Nate attacks Scutch's leg with a rod, shouting that the attackers came to his old house because Scutch revealed the location, thinking Nate still lived there. Scutch starts screaming and cursing at Nate. Topper rushes in and tries to calm them both down, saying things can't continue like this. They need to strike back. Meanwhile, the two killers return to Brandon Butler and tell him they found neither Nate nor any money. Brandon scolds them, saying they should have searched the house properly because the cash must have been there. He orders them to go find Nate and Topper and kill them. One of the killers asks what they should do with the bodies. Brandon insults them, mocks them, and curses at them. Brandon then takes the killers into the forest to show them where to bury the bodies after killing Nate and Topper. Along the way, he keeps mocking them and talking to them disrespectfully. When they reach a spot deep in the woods, Brandon points and says they can bury the bodies there. Suddenly, one of the killers grabs Brandon, stabs him, and kills him on the spot. Meanwhile, Nate's team is once again bringing product from Canada, preparing to cross into the US. During the run, one of the boys suddenly says he needs to take a dump and has to go immediately. Topper tells him to hurry up. The boy pretends to use the toilet but secretly takes some product out of his bag and hides it there in the forest. After the delivery, he returns to the same spot to retrieve the hidden product. The boy carries the hidden stash toward his car, but after driving only a short distance, he sees a police vehicle following him. Terrified, he panics. Meanwhile, a man who had come to the forest for hiking discovers Brandon Butler's dead body and immediately calls the police officers arrive at the crime scene, and the news spreads everywhere. Nate and his team also see the news, and Topper asks Nate if he was the one behind all of this. Nate replies that everything he ever did was for a reason, but he can't share all the details with him. Elsewhere, the police interrogate Daniel, the boy they had arrested earlier. They scare him by describing the punishment he could face, and Daniel, frightened, agrees to tell them everything. Meanwhile, Nate is sleeping at the house that belongs to Barry. Barry arrives and tells Nate that the police are after them now. He gives Nate the address of a friend who lives up north and tells him to go stay there. Barry says he trusts Nate because Nate was honest with him in business, so he wants to help him one last time. Soon, Daniel fully cooperates with the police, and authorities arrest Nate's team as they cross the Canada-US border with marijuana. During questioning, the police learn that Nate's team had smuggled around $68 million worth of marijuana into the US, weighing a total of about 18 tons. When asked who their boss was, the boys all name Nate Norman. They tell the police that Nate handled all the financing, dealt with the dealers and customers, and even had Brandon Butler killed. They claim Nate threatened to kill their families if they didn't keep working. To save themselves from harsh punishment, they put all the blame on Nate police, arrive at Nate's house to arrest him, but they only find his mother and little brother. Nate had already escaped the country. Meanwhile, Nate is on a ferry in Canada and calls his mother. He tells her that his lawyer said he might get 10 years in prison for money laundering alone. Nate's mother tells him to stay where he is and never think about coming back because if he returns, they will lock him up for life. Nate apologizes to her, but she tells him he did nothing wrong. Still, Nate's mother is consumed with worry, and Nate turns around and heads back toward the US. At the border, police are already waiting for him because Nate had contacted them earlier, saying he wanted to surrender. Officers arrest him, and Nate is heartbroken as he is taken away. In this case, all of Nate's teammates are sentenced to 20 to 30 months in prison. Topper receives a 20-month sentence. U.S. authorities also managed to put pressure on John, the Canadian grower, forcing him to shut down his marijuana business. Nate himself is sentenced to 12 years in prison. Barry, however, remains untouched by the police and continues running his cell phone business quietly in Seattle. And with this, the movie ends. So friends, that was the unbelievable true story of Nate Norman, a high school dropout who built $1 million empire and lost everything in the end. If you enjoyed this detailed recap, make sure to smash at least 12,000 likes on this video. Your support truly motivates me to bring even more intense, mind-blowing stories for you. Drop a yes in the comments if you want the next recap, and I'll be back with another thrilling script soon.